I'm not going to go too deep into this either because I had shot it last week and I still haven't gotten to it. I have to do a little editing on it. But I did last week's right angle. We shot this week's right angle this morning at 6 o'clock here. It's 36 degrees, which is pretty cold in LA. But last week I did a right angle, and I don't want to give too much of it away because I can show pictures on the right angle. But I did go on December 27th to see a movie that was shown twice, once on December 21st and once on December 22nd, one day only. It was a documentary made by Peter Jackson from Lord of the Rings, and it was called They Shall Not Grow Old. And wow. Basically, in 2014, the British Imperial Museum asked Jackson if he would do a documentary on the First World War, and his only instructions were it'd be nice if it were something that were just kind of different, unique. So, so Peter Jackson gets 100 hours of black and white footage in various stages of repair, and so then what he did was he decided to put, he handed it off to his effects company, Weta Workshop, which I think is the best special effects house in the world. I just think it's astonishing. We saw Mortal Engines, which is a movie of his, and it was also just visually just astonishing. So here's what Peter Jackson did. He gave him a couple of tests, and what they did was, when you look at World War I footage, it's always comical because they're marching so fast, and they don't even look like people; they look like ants. They shot that footage at a standard of 16 frames per second. In the documentary about how he made this movie, he says it was supposed to be 16 frames a second. If it shoot it at 16 and you project it at 24, needless to say, it's gonna play fast. So he said, but none of them were ever the same. No, every single clip he had were slightly different frame rates because there was a guy out in the field cranking the camera. Movies were brand new in movie recordings out in the field during the Great War. So what Peter Jackson did was he took the scratched, grainy, very fast footage and took a couple of clips and handed it to his special effects team. And you'll see this in the right angle, which I hope to have up tomorrow. And the shot they used to open the trailer is a shot of the British tanks in World War I, the ones with the treads that went all the way around. And you see them, and they're in grainy black and white, and they're moving fast. And then this thing dissolves, and all of a sudden, it is like he had taken a modern camera and put it right next to the other one and filmed the exact same tank going over the exact same thing. So what they did was, first of all, they had to stop, get the thing running in real time, and that meant that if you're going to take it from 16 frames a second to 24 frames a second, you're out of frames. There's just not enough frames to fill a second if it's 24 frames a second. So the first thing they had to do was write software that would allow that allowed the computer to draw frames between frames. It would look at frame number 1 and frame number 2, and it would add frame number 1.5 wherever they were needed. And so when he slowed it down to, well, technically when he speeded it up, but when it appears to be slowed down, and Simon says just posted a link, and it's astonishing. So what they did was, since there's no missing frames, and since they're not reprinting a frame, like frame print, like sometimes makes it look choppy, since there's 24 frames a second when it was only recorded at 16, the computer has drawn in the additional 8 frames a second. Sorry. Yes. And so the motion is perfectly smooth. That's the first thing he did. Second thing he did was he took all of the scratches and pops and everything out of it, so that even the black and white footage is absolutely pristine. He added color and went to a great deal of color to colorize every frame. I did not know this, but he's an enormous World War One buff. That's why he got it. He has personally, he owns hundreds of World War One uniforms. So they just go to Peter Jackson's closet and find out what the actual color should be. So the colorization was fantastic. Then using computer magic, that still I know how they did the other stuff, but this still amazes me. They made it into 3D. And so you go from seeing this rickety black and white footage of this ancient looking tank, and on that link you'll see it in the trailer, and it just morphs into three-dimensional color at real speed. And then the actual genuine genius of it was the whole story is told through the voices of World War I veterans, none of whom are around anymore. But as it turns out, the BBC did a number of interviews with World War I vets back in the 60s. So you've got literally hundreds of voices telling the story, put together a tremendous narrative. And the last little piece of work that he did is, I think, actually was to me the most effective and the most moving. So now he had what used to be black and white film of guys marching and talking and pointing and stuff. Got it slowed down, got the picture sharp, increased the sharpness using computer algorithms, and then he's got this beautiful three-dimensional colorized film of World War I that has no audio at all. And so what he did was he hired forensic lip readers, and they watched the footage very carefully and repeatedly, and they found out what everybody on camera was actually saying. And then, this is why Peter Jackson is a genius and not just a good filmmaker. And then what he did was he did the research on whatever particular regiment or unit you were looking at. And if it was a Yorkshire regiment, he hired actors from that part of England so that the accents would be exactly the same. And when you hear these guys speaking and see them in color, in 3D, in what looks like real time, it's just unspeakably moving, and really genuinely felt like going back in time. If the link is still there if you scroll up on the comment section here, if you're watching this, we'll try and remember to post it on the YouTube version. But there's a couple things that movie did, and Foghorn's got it. It's a time machine. That's exactly what it is. And I realized this is just the beginning of it. The ability for the computer to take, not just to make a you could get good computer graphics of a tank. And in fact, there's a Battlefield 1 is a World War I set game, and that's pretty astonishingly real looking. It's exceedingly unrealistic in terms of its action, but it looks very good. But what you see is it really go back in time. And when you see the faces of these guys, and you hear them speaking in their language, it's unbelievable. One of the points Jackson made, because the movie was about an hour long, and then attached to the back of it was a half-hour documentary on how they made the movie, which was nearly as interesting as the movie. And he said what they found making the documentary was the same problem that the filmmakers at the time had, the actual people who shot the footage. And that problem is that since no one in World War I had ever seen a movie camera before, they could not get the soldiers to do what they're supposed to do. Every single shot is nothing but a bunch of guys looking at the camera. And reminds me of Francis Ford Coppola in Apocalypse Now, in his little cameo. Don't look at the camera. Just keep shooting, keep running. Don't look at the camera. Everybody's looking at the camera. They've never seen anything like it before. They're all smiling, not all smiling, waving and stuff. So this movie starts with a little screen within a screen, and it's shot in the square, 3x4 image format. much more square than what we see now, which is a much more pleasing frame, this wide-angle HD frame. And so you're in a theater, you've got a wide screen like this, but it's kind of choked down on strongly on the sides, a little bit on the top and the bottom. And it's got a little rounded vignette. And what he's done is he's taken the black and white footage. This is how it starts for about a half an hour. He's taken the black and white footage. He's gotten all of the pops out of it. And he's gotten all of the scratches out of it. And he sharpened it. And he made it in 3D. So it looks like you're looking through a hole that somebody cut in the movie screen. And then this black and white footage is back there beyond there. And I thought, okay, so he's gonna do something where he's gonna transform this black and white film into color. And that's exactly what he did. But what really surprised me was I thought he was going to do this within 30 seconds or something. You watch 20 minutes, maybe almost a half an hour, something like that. 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of World War I footage the way you would expect to see it, sped up, black and white, but razor sharp and in 3D. And I thought, when is he going to get to the punch here? You know, I mean, does he only have 4 minutes of effects? And that's what we saw in the trailer, the whole thing. And it took me a while to figure out. In fact, I didn't figure out what he was doing until the end of the movie. And then he didn't tell me. Before they got to the documentary during the credits, I realized exactly what he was doing. So it gives you about 15, 20 minutes or more of the footage the way you're used to seeing it. And I knew he was going to take one shot that was going to show us it was going to go from the old footage to the new footage. And I was sure it was going to be the tank shot, because the tank shot just happens to be so unbelievably, astonishingly powerful. I got to click on that link that John C. Pershing put up there. I just got to click on that. Hopefully I will look at that later. Okay, so where are we? So you're seeing all this black and white footage, and I wondered, where is he going to do the move? And I thought it was going to be something spectacular. And I thought, okay, I know what he'll do. We've seen the training, we've seen people enlisting, we hear the voices of the veterans. It's all in black and white. The second that there's an explosion in war, the first boom, that's when we're going to go to the color and the 3D and all that stuff. But that's not when he did it. He did it on a shot of young British soldiers walking along a road, a sunken road, on their way to the front, and every one of them looking at the camera as they went by. And again, the genius of the guy is he found a face that was so young, extremely young, probably the kid was probably 16, and so amazed by it. And so you see these stick figures, and then it just slows down, and then this color comes in, and the 3D comes in, and the blue eyes of the kids start to come in, and he's pushed in hard on that frame. The software is astonishing, keeping it really sharp, and you're looking at this kid's face as he's looking at this movie camera, and you just make the connection. You just make the human connection that you never made before, which is that these are real people. If you've ever seen pictures of Hitler in color, they had color film in World War II. They didn't have it in World War I. But if you've seen, especially movie film of Hitler in color, there's some color film that was shot up at Berchtesgaden. And when you see Hitler in color, it's almost like he was a real guy. And when you see all of these things in color in World War II, you start thinking, oh, seeing it in color, it actually happened. It was real. And when he did that with World War I, it just was astonishing. And it was especially difficult technically because the things that he had to colorize are things that don't colorize well. He had to colorize skin tone. That's not easy. It's a really tough thing to get right. And he had to colorize mud. And he had to colorize grass. And he found out real early that if you just made the grass green, it looked fake, that the grass had different shades of green depending on how it was growing and how thick it was. And he did all of that stuff. And the reason I know that the colorization was so powerful was because the whole war was mud colored, the whole thing. It was, the British were in muddy khaki, just nothing but mud that was churned up. They're brown and green ground, blue sky, pale blue sky. And the reason that you could tell that the colorization was so good was the only time the color really hit you was when you saw the blood. And blood came out so red. It was just so shockingly red. You never ever get that looking at a black and white picture of World War I. You'll see a guy and he'll have a bandage on his hand or something, and it's stained darker, and you know he's bleeding, but you just don't process it. But when you see that red just leaping out at you like that, it's unbelievable. And to colorize the dead, you get to see where they were hit, and it's simply unbelievable. They spent a fair amount of time on a shot. Some footage they had was taken just a short time, like an hour or half an hour before an offensive, and they weren't in trenches. I thought, they had lots and lots of stuff in the trenches, but this particular assault was being launched from a sunken road and looked a lot like the hedgerows in World War II. And you see this group of, I don't know, 10 or 15 British soldiers, British Tommies, and they know they're going to go over the top in 15, 20 minutes. And they're trying not to look scared, but one of them looks really scared. And then Peter Jackson, in the Making of documentary, shows photographs that he took a year ago from that exact same location, and the road looks exactly the same. So now you can see the sunken road as it appeared to them, because it's a 4K beautiful, razor sharp modern image of this scene, which you've just seen in the movie, and now your mind can put those guys there and make the connection. And after you've basically done this little bit of mental trickery by looking at a modern photograph of the scene with all of the landmarks and everything exactly the same, you can see where the guys must have stood. You can remember where each individual guy was and leaning against a shovel and all the rest of it. And then, because he's a great filmmaker, went back, showed the shot, showed the British soldiers there in the same place. Yeah, the sunken lane. Yeah, we just saw it. Great. And then he said, turned out that this unit, when they went over the top, suffered something like 85% killed. And he said virtually everybody that you're looking at in the shot was being filmed in the last 30 minutes of their life. Man. It's just, that part of it is almost, it's almost a little obscene in a way, to hear that and to see them again and see the faces again. This is their last 15, 20, 30 minutes alive. In 20 minutes from now, they're going to blow that stupid whistle, and these guys are going to jump over the side of that embankment, and 1 in 5 is going to come back. And the expression on the face of one of those guys, he's just so wide-eyed, and you don't often see that. And you don't, and certainly they show movies, and I've seen World War I movies, and I've seen actors playing scared in World War I movies, and they're going, oh, Sergeant, they're acting scared, and it's great. And I've seen a lot of movies with well acted World War I scenes, and I've seen lots of actors play scared very well. I think probably Gallipoli was the best example of that. Gallipoli, before the charge at the end of Gallipoli, it's just fantastic. It's just heartbreaking. But the look on this guy wasn't a look of, gee, Sarge, I'm scared. He didn't. If you were to direct the scene and have an actor play it scared, he wouldn't look like what this guy looked like. This guy had an expression on his face, huge wide eyes, but his expression strikes me as the expression of somebody who simply could not believe where he was. He couldn't believe where he was, and he couldn't believe what he was going to have to do. It wasn't the 1,000-yard stare you get after combat. It was just this. It was like you could see it in his eyes. This is some kind of terrible nightmare, and I'm going to wake up from it any moment now, and it's unbelievable. So just to cap this off, so you see 20 minutes, 25 minutes of black and white footage in the beginning. Then he opens the screen up, you go to widescreen, color, three-dimensional, 24 frames a second with the voiceover. You can hear what the guys are saying, lots and lots of joking. The thing that blew me away was not only on the video, but the veterans doing the recreation. They're talking about how much fun they had, Oh, it was a blast, it was a lark. Yes, it's true, it was dangerous on the front, but, just a bunch of chaps, and you'd think that attitude would go away, but it actually didn't. And when the end of the war comes, you see these guys sitting on the road after the armistice has been announced, and they're just depressed. Obviously, they're blown out emotionally, but you hear these guys again and again and again saying, I felt like I just got fired and I was made redundant on a job that I'd been doing for 4 or 5 years, and I was let down and disappointed. What am I going to do now? And just you'd think they'd be jumping for joy, but no one was jumping for joy. They were just plain just disbelief and sadness. And again, I'm telling you all this because you have to go to the effort to see this. Undoubtedly, it'll be released on some kind of pay-per-view very soon. You got to watch this film, because I don't know how many times I have read about World War I and read about the armistice, which happens at 11 o'clock in the morning on the 11th day of the 11th month, and so on. And you hear people describe, and you read it on pages, and you hear people describe, and the gunfire basically just ended. And that's an evocative image, but it's you're reading it, or Steve Darrow, called "They Shall Not Grow Old," a documentary about World War I. And so when you hear that the gunfire just died away, you think, oh, that must have been something. But they showed these guys milling around, and you could hear them talking to each other, and in the background was just sparse, pretty light shell fire, but just you've spent the last entire hour with nothing but exploding shell sounds. That's all you've had in the background. And they're real sharp sounds too. It's not that kind of gas explosion. It's real crisp, boom, And you're watching these guys milling around, and you hear and you just hear the echo, and that's the end of the war. So the final thing I'll say about this, and actually I think what the most amazing gift of this film is this. He starts you off in black and white at 16 frames a second and gives you a good long dose of it so that you get used to seeing World War I footage. This is what World War I footage looks like. Guys marching very fast, and they're sped up because they were recorded at a slower speed. So he starts with 25 minutes of that or so. And then so when he makes the move to 24 frames a second, 3D color with sound, it just blows you away. Just absolutely blows you away. But then at the end of the movie, he does something that's just absolute crazy genius. And that is the final 5 minutes of the movie or so. He goes back to the black and white at 16 frames a second. And the reason that's so brilliant is that after watching this hour of 3D color, when the black and white footage comes back, I swear, your mind does what the computer has been doing for the last hour. You will watch this footage, and your mind will just automatically put it into 3D and put it into normal speed and get the color right, and you'll hear the voices and the accents, and you'll never look at World War I footage again the same way, because what Jackson did in that hour was he trained your brain on how to look at this footage the way it actually was. And you can apply that, obviously not to the same effect, but you can apply it to regular World War I footage. Yeah, the link is if somebody wants to post the link again, that's great. It's been up there for those live. We'll try to remember to put it up on YouTube. But what Peter Jackson did was not just great filmmaking. Peter Jackson in this movie. I was almost going to say he did a public service, but cleaning up garbage on the side of the freeway is a public service. Peter Jackson is the first one, and this is the part that's most exciting about They Shall Not Grow Old. Peter Jackson gave us these people back, and you spend an hour with them, and you hear them joking, and boy, you want to talk about bad teeth. And just what terrible physical condition they were in before they got in the Army. I mean, my whole half of my family is from there. It's from Lancashire, and they're all mill workers and coal miners, and they had teeth like that, and I used to have teeth like that. And it's when you see how scrawny they are. That's the only word for them. How it's kind of stooped and scrawny, and they're one guy in 100 has all his teeth. Half of them have half of their teeth, and the rest of them are missing 3 or 4, and they're just shocking. It's just really unbelievable how awful these guys look. In fact, they show hundreds and hundreds of faces during World War I, and they come to this one guy because there's only one guy in the entire war, as far as we could see, who looked handsome. He was a handsome guy. He was a young, handsome guy with a nice smile. He looked like he was the only modern person in the entire war. So, anyway, it's absolutely magnificent, and now that it's been done, and done so well, it's obviously going to win best documentary of the year. No, there's no question about that. But now that it's done, and the power of it hits you, then that technology can not only be applied to other World War I footage, but think about what they can do with World War II, because the World War II footage is in much, much better shape than the World War I footage, shot at the same frame rate. Most of it's black and white. But if he can colorize and then lip sync and add sound effects to World War I footage, what he can do with World War II will bring World War II to life in a way that we've never seen it before, and I expect that's just a couple years away from now. Like I said, when you see the it's all mud and grass and skin tones, and then the blood is just so red it just knocks your eyes out, it just comes at you, and it's just like, oh my God. So yeah, Anat. I'm sorry, my eyes did not what Anat 47 yet. Says modern medicine and nutrition have amazing effects. No, it does have amazing effects. Have you ever looked at a high school picture of high school seniors from, let's say, 1915? They all look like they're 40. And having seen high school picture graduations from the class of 2018 rather than 1918, they all look like they're 11. I don't think you could find the ugliest kid in a classroom today and have him not be just an absolute knockout 100 years ago. And Dave Big Booty was saying he was on the USS Midway museum ship yesterday, and it brought naval combat home for him. Yeah, I've been doing nothing but reading Lady Gulf. I've just been saturating in it. I was going to spend time talking about that. I might do it again. But I've just been absolutely lost in the 4 battles that made up the Battle of Lady Gulf, and I keep reading the same story again and again and again by different authors because I just can't get enough of it. It was amazing, and so I'm looking forward to the They Shall Not Grow Old treatment of World War II footage, which will be. It's not the same as as a produced drama. I thought Band of Brothers was excellent, unbelievably good. I thought The Pacific was far worse, but still had some amazing moments in it. But it's still acting, and I can't put my finger on it. I talked a little bit about it a minute ago about the guy who had that terrified look. But there's something about the actual reaction that is different than the dramatic reaction. And my experience, having watched as much of this as I can soak up, is that experience is not anything that either actors or directors can connect to, and so they always play what they think it must be like, and they're trying to do their very best job. Certainly, if I was ever directing a film about World War I or World War II, prior to seeing this Jackson thing anyway, I believe you had a guy who was terrified. I'd have an actor make him look terrified. I wouldn't have an actor looking around in disbelief, like he woke up in Norway, or like he woke up in Baghdad. That's the look that this guy had when he was scared. He didn't have this just sheer disbelief that he was going to have to go over there and get killed in 15 minutes. It's interesting you mentioned the Midway. There was one of the escort carriers, Lancome Bay, Fanshawe Bay, one of those Jeep carriers, was named USS Midway just immediately right after the battle, and then they realized, or maybe it was one of the destroyers or escorts, but I think it was one of the Jeep carriers. And the Battle of Midway just happened, so the next ship they commissioned, they named the USS Midway, and once they've done this and laid the keel and started building the USS Midway, which is a Kaiserkoffen, just a Jeep carrier, a little, slow, tiny little aircraft carrier, it suddenly dawns on people, we really should do something a little more impressive with Midway. So the original Midway, I don't know, it might have been the same hull. I suspect it was the same hull. So then the next of the big Essex class carriers comes out, and they name that Midway, which meant they had to change the name of the previous ship to either Fanshawe Bay or Lascaux Bay. It was one of the Taffy 3 ships, I think. And sailors say that if you ever have a ship that's name is changed, that's incredibly bad luck, and there it goes. So I kind of think Midway was one of just a few carriers that started out as World War II carriers, straight deck carriers, and then they added the angled deck because Midway came pretty late to the war and served in Korea and Vietnam and past that, but it set sail a week after World War II ended. How about that? Okay, Gambier Bay, thank you very much, Teddy. And Dave, I didn't know that Midway didn't even make it into the war. So anyway, so Midway was interesting because it started out. I've seen a plan view looking down on Midway, the USS Midway, and here it is starting out as an Essex class carrier, and here it is a change. And here's another change. Here's another change. Another change. Another change. And it's an amazing ship. I'd love to go see it. I've been dying to get down there and go see it. But Leyte Gulf and. I mean, I've read the story of the Samuel Roberts and the Johnston, and I think that the USS Hull gets really shortchanged because that destroyer was in there too. It just got hit earlier and didn't do as much damage. So it was the first one to sink. But nevertheless, the story of USS Johnston and USS Samuel B. Roberts. Why has that movie not been made? I can't understand why that movie was not made. it's simply the best story ever, and I've talked about it before. I'm not going to spend any more time on it right now, but it was absolutely incredible. Anyway, that's our little walk in the park we usually do in the beginning. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the questions, and we'll do that. Oh, by the way, after these guys on these destroyer escorts, which is essentially the size of a large tugboat, it's half the size of it's 2/3 the size of a destroyer, and destroyers are tin cans. Their armor is, the destroyer escort, the hull was probably, I think, half-inch steel. It went up against the Yamato, which had, I want to say, 20 inches of steel, more maybe. So these guys go sailing in there, and they basically saved the entire landing with the courage from basically 2 or 3 ships just on their own, just go charge this Japanese juggernaut. And Hull sinks, Johnston sinks, Roberts sinks, and was it Gambier Bay? One of the escort carriers sinks. But the guys go charging into battle to save these slow escort carriers, and their ships are sunk underneath them, and they're losing. They lost half or a third of their crew in combat. Yeah, 20 inches of steel, at least that much. It's the battleship armor is amazing. So these vessels sink, and it's not like we don't know where they are, because the entire U.S. Navy was gunning them down, and the Japanese fleet turned around. And a pilot or two came over after the battle. American pilot came in low. It was in an Avenger. He saw the guys in the water, wagged his wings so they knew that he saw them. And they expected they'd be picked up within a couple of hours of being in the water. Well, it turns out that because of the radio silence, the guy was not able to report their position, and by the time he got back to the carrier, he'd gotten the coordinates wrong, and they started looking for these guys 200 miles away from where they were, or something like that. So after this incredible act of heroism, surrounded by the entire U.S. Navy, essentially, these guys spend a day in the water, covered in oil, which actually saved a lot of them from sunburn. And then they spend a night in the water when the sharks come around, and then they spend another day in the water, and then they spent a second night in the water when, by this time, virtually every one of them had drunken so much salt water that they were hallucinating, including the captain of the Roberts thing. They would be floating, and one guy would see a beach party with men in tuxedos and ladies in gowns, and another guy thought that there was fresh water just immediately below where he was. That there was a pool of fresh water directly below the raft that he was floating on, and some of them would just simply dive down to get it, and they'd never be seen again. But one story that you guys just need to know about. There was a young guy from Oklahoma named Charles Natter, and he was a big Oklahoma, farm boy, and very good swimmer, former lifeguard. And when the Roberts sank, they ended up in 2 groups. The big group had the captain and a number of executive officers. There was a different group with much worse outcomes that just had a couple of brand new ensigns. And this is not the Indianapolis. This is the Samuel B. Johnson. Indianapolis was worse, but this was plenty bad. So these sharks would start coming, and there was a small group of guys, maybe 10 guys, that were on floating planks. They just threw these planks overboard, grabbed onto them, and it was, and they were 100 yards or maybe a little more, 200 yards away from the main group, which had some rafts and netting and so on. And that's where the captain and where most of the survivors were. And they were calling over to these guys on the planks to come, and they'd been so traumatized and exhausted and badly wounded in many cases that most of them just decided not to swim to get over there. They're going to stay on the planks. So this guy, Charlie Natter, who had been a lifeguard, who entered the water pretty much completely unwounded, and just if anybody's going to make it, it's going to be him. So he swims over to help one of these guys, and because he's a lifeguard, he takes one of these guys off the planks, swims 100 yards out there, gets him, swims 100 yards back with him, gets him on the raft, and then he goes back for another one. And Natter did this 8 times. And on the 9th trip, he was about to get his friend out off these planks, and a shark took the friend right in front of his eyes. Just guy starts screaming, and he disappears under the water. And just a few seconds later, shark came up and ripped Charlie Natter to shreds. Just pulled him under the water and never seen again. What do you do about that? I don't know why. I don't know why everybody doesn't know that guy's name. I really, really don't. It's a mystery to me. They're just they should know Evan's name, and they should know Copeland's name, and they should know the names of all of these people. But that Natter, I mean, that and there's and then another gunner named Carr. I forget his first name. I think it was John. He was in one of the 2 5-inch turrets on the Samuel Roberts on the destroyer Escort. A 5-inch gun literally bounces off of the armor of cruisers, even battleships and cruisers. You hit it. If you hit it in the side of the hull, the round just bounces off. You might as well shot him with a .22. But what these guys were doing is Johnson and Roberts were putting out so much fire so fast, and they were just aiming for the bridge and aiming for the superstructure, and they turned away the force. They scared this Japanese battle group away, and the guy was in the number, I think it was in the number 2 gun, the stern gun on the Roberts. I'm probably going to get these numbers wrong, but it's very close. They had each one of these turrets had 345 shells. It might have been a different number, but I'm pretty sure it was 345. And they got out something like 335 shells in record time, and just unbelievable how fast they were. They were just so well trained. The skipper had been so good about these drills, and this aft turret, especially the first turret, was amazing, but the after turret was just unbelievable. It was almost like automatic, like boom, boom. They're just burning these shells out there. And one of the gun directors was this kid named Carr. And something like 10 or 15 rounds before they got to the end of the ammunition, literally run out of shells. They've shot everything. They're shooting illumination shells, the kind of things that go up on parachutes. They're shooting those off the side of the battleship. They're shooting anything they got in whatever order they got. They're just shooting them. And, something like 10 rounds before they run out of ammunition, the turret takes a hit, and it knocks out the gas ejection system. So basically what happens is you fire off a shell, and there's this superheated gas from the explosion, and it is blown out of the breech, I guess, or out of the barrel, one or the other. But it's that super hot gas is blown out to keep the gun cool. And so that gas ejection system failed, which meant that when they'd open the breech, it was very, very hot in there, and every time they'd fire another round, it got hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And on the 344th out of the 345 rounds that they had, they put the shell in there, they put the powder charge in there, and the gun was so hot. And they knew this was coming. It was a surprise to them. They put the charge in there, and the charge just exploded with the breech open. Killed everybody in the turret, I think, with one exception. And when other guys from the ship got there, this guy Carr, who'd been loading that gun, I did tell this last time, I'll tell it again, I'm going to tell it 1,000 times if I have to, had been, the force of the explosion had ripped him open from his collarbone to his groin. He was just literally just split open like a baked potato, and he's holding one of these 5-inch shells, and he's begging the guys who came in to rescue him, begging them to help him load the shell into this gun, which is just completely twisted metal. And so they say it's okay, John. They take the shell out of his hands, put it on the deck, sit him down, take some wounded guys out of the turret, set them on the deck, go back in the turret to get Carr, and Carr's picked up the shell again, and he's trying to get it into this gun. But we know everything the Kardashians are doing, so it's I used to bang my head against the wall about these things. I don't do that anymore. I try not to do that anymore. I realize now that it's not the number of people who know these things; it's that somebody knows these things. And as long as these stories are told, that's all that really matters. So at that happy note, and it is a happy note. Well, final note. So the Samuel B. Roberts, the destroyer escort was the smallest warship that the Navy had in World War II, and they said it was the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, just turned right in and headed the Yamato. By the way, Yamato and Musashi, the biggest, most powerful warships ever created, in complete secrecy because they were a violation of the treaties at the time. These two super battleships that the Japanese had put so many resources into these two monster giant battleships, which they kept close to port because they were national symbols. They were just national honor. And so when they finally sortied out there for the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Yamato and its sister ship Musashi, sailing one right in front of the other, the most powerful warships in the world with 18-inch guns. The captain, the admiral commanding them, didn't know how big the guns were until he got aboard, and then they had to refer to them as special 16-inch guns because 18-inch guns were illegal and never been made before. So the Yamato and the Musashi could throw a shell 25 miles. The Johnson could throw a shell 7 miles. He had to get into range. But here's the thing. The Japanese put so many resources into these two incredible prestige battleships. And then when they finally sailed off into battle, in the first stage of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, this incoming surface fleet was caught by American naval aircraft and Air Force aircraft, Army aircraft based on the islands. And they sank the Musashi, and the Musashi had never fired a round out of those guns. Just as she was going under, they started to fire a couple of anti-aircraft rounds. They wanted to keep the guns pristine for the big surface battle, the big decisive battle that's coming. But the Musashi never, ever fired those guns at a surface vessel. They fired a couple of rounds of this, air-bursting mega shell. And then the next day, Musashi's sunk, Yamato comes out, and I'm not aware that Yamato hit anything. I think if the Yamato had, certainly if the Yamato had hit either the Johnston or the Hull or the Roberts, it simply would have just vaporized the ship. I don't think the escort carriers took any rounds from 18-inch rounds. So they put all of this insane effort into these gigantic battleships that cost a fortune and they could have built hundreds of other ships with what they spent on those two. And one of them went down without ever firing a shot at another ship, and the other one eventually went down after firing a few rounds at other ships in one conflict only, and apparently didn't contribute to the sinking of any one of them. But in the best case scenario, this super battleship, the two super battleships, best case scenario. No, it's not. We'll do a long show tonight. Everybody relax about the Q&A. It didn't sink anything. That's why I've become a big believer in dispersal of assets. This idea of the super ship doesn't end well. All right. Anyway, enough of that. Sorry. So let's get on with the questions, and we'll do a longer show tonight 'cause it's been a while, and I want to get to these questions. And I've been going on and on about stuff I talked about last week, but nevertheless, it's on my mind.